We're recording a third podcast in a row. People thought they were going to get rid of us in the offseason. There's even more podcasts now.
Have we ever done three in a row? Well, I guess during the draft we would do three in a row. So it is precedented. But hey, there's a lot. Look, it's the first week after the season. It's a big week and a lot of stuff going on. So happy to be here.
Exactly. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Ray Didinger will join us in just a little bit to recap the season. Always enjoy talking to Ray. And but before we get to that, Rube, since it is the off season, it's funny. People think that, like, I have friends texting me, like, what are you going to do now that the season's over? And like, well, I mean, I'm still working. Like, there's still quite a bit going on.
These aren't like temporary jobs from like August to December.
People think they are. Like, I had a friend text me today, like, what are you going to do now? I'm like, well, you're ready for the draft and free agency. It doesn't really stop. But I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite part of any offseason? Because there are a lot of different types of things that go on.
Yeah, there's those certain days that you look forward to each year. Whether it's like final roster cuts or the first day of training camp. For me, it's that first hour of the of free agency, the legal tampering, whatever you want to call it. That first hour, because the legal tampering, I mean, look, guys, it's just basically free agency. They're just not officially signing the deals yet. Because that first hour it's just unbelievable how much happens and how many contracts get done, how many people leave the Eagles and how many they sign. You see former Eagles going to different places. There's blockbuster contracts, and we'll sit there and like take turns because if there's news stories, that's how Dave and I decide who writes what. It's like, whose turn is it? Like Derek Barnett just signed with the Seahawks, I'll write it, and then Jordan Howard just signed with the Jaguars. I get, and like every 5 minutes there's like a new story that we have to write. So it's really it's the first real day where the next year's team starts to take shape. The next year's team starts to form, and so the first day free agency for me is probably my favorite day of the offseason.
That legal tampering window is the funniest thing in the world because that's a relatively recent thing. That started probably 6 years ago?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. And in the beginning of that legal tampering window, nothing was getting reported. Like, people were trying to abide by the rules. And now it's just no one gives a crap. You're just getting full contract details out there. And technically, they're not official. Like, I mean, a guy could back out and sign elsewhere. It's rare that would happen, but it could theoretically happen because it takes a while within a couple of years after that legal tampering window went in, it was just everything's a free-for-all. And the funny thing is, you're putting all these people in Indianapolis for the combine at the same time. So you have, agents and coaches and GMs all at the same official places and then the same watering holes. And they're not allowed to talk about players who might be. Yeah. Good luck with that. It doesn't exactly work. That's a hectic day, though. So it's not my favorite. And it's hard to prepare for it. And I get what you're saying. The first hour is all right, we're in front of our computers. We're working. I hate the first week, though, after that, because it's you feel like you have a gun to your head. Like every time, I'm going grocery shopping, I'm staring at my phone to make sure I don't miss anything. So I don't like that part of it, but I get what you're saying about the first hour. For me, it's the draft. I love the draft because it's you spend months, really a year, leading up to it, learning about these players and figuring out where they're going to go. And there's always surprises. It never goes the way you think it's going to go. And then honestly, from kind of a hokey perspective, I just like seeing kids get drafted. It's still fun to me. I'm not cynical like that. I see a 21-year-old kid get drafted and fulfilling his life dream. It's still cool. It really is. And you get to meet the guys now. It's all virtual, but hopefully at some point we'll get in-person press conferences. Like the next day, the first round pick flies in, you meet him for the first time. That's always fun to me. I like that. And then, me, I'm always, the second they draft a guy, I'm working on a feature and trying to figure out stuff about his life. And honestly, it's even fun. Like the day 3 of the draft, you get into like, I'll be honest, sometimes I draft a guy and I'm like, I have no idea who that is. Like, just no idea. And it's that I like that scramble to figure out who the heck this guy is before they get him on the phone for us.
My favorite, and we kind of have a running joke, like if the Eagles draft a kid in the 6th round and he starts talking about how like his biggest inspiration was his peewee football teammate, Eric Thompson, an hour later, Dave's like, hey, Eric, it's Dave. Dave's always looking for that angle. And but I appreciate that. I remember when the Eagles drafted A.J. Feely, I got on the phone with Joey Harrington. I called him up to find out about what it was like kind of going back and forth at Oregon with 2 quarterbacks. But yeah, the thing I love about the draft is, and I'm not a draft Nick, because I don't watch a lot of college football because we're so wrapped up in the NFL during the season. But, once the season's over, I start, researching everything and learning as much as I can. But the moment a guy is drafted by the Eagles and like Devontae Smith, Eagles draft Devontae Smith, and you're like, this guy's going to be here for the next 5 years, by saying one name, like by a guy walking up with a little thing to the commissioner, our lives changed, his lives changed. We're going to be covering this guy for the next 5 years. We're going to be writing about him and watching him grow and, getting to know him. It's like that one moment, like decides so much of the future. So it's a pretty cool process that I've never gotten tired of. I mean, when I started covering the draft, I have a One Eye story. I mean, we had fax machines in the draft room. We had, we would have our Lads guide, our Kuiper's guide, your Joel Bushbaum guide, because there's no internet. They hadn't invented it yet. So we had all the draft guides, and I would have like 8 of them. And you'd bring your draft guides, you'd bring your printer and your fax machine, and just like only the first round was on TV. So you would just sit there, and a PR guy would be on the phone getting the picks. Like there was no ESPN, so like network would cover the first round. And then that was it. So it was a whole different, and I think it was all in one day when I started. They had 12 rounds in one day. So
it's amazing it came from that. And then like it was that famous clip a few years ago when Mike Mayock was still at NFL Network. And I think then San Diego, didn't they have like a orangutan announce the pick or something like that? Do you remember that?
I don't remember.
And Mayock was just so mad because he's put all this work into learning the players. Then a monkey announces a pick. That was fun.
We wouldn't even stay for the whole draft because like there was no reason to. So you would file your story and you'd go home, and then you'd get a fax at the end of the night saying like in the 7th round and the 8th round, like we took Clyde Simmons, in the 9th round we took Seth Joyner. It's like, I wasn't covering it yet in '86, but yeah, it was different. It's definitely a lot more fun now.
Yeah, but it's going to be a long off season. We can't wait to get to all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, score big with the AAA Eagles MVP membership, along with the superb roadside assistance and discounts you've come to expect from AAA. Get exclusive Eagles-related perks. For all the details, visit AAA.com/Eagles.
Joining us now on the Eagle Eye Podcast, as he did every week throughout the season, we have to put a cap on this. Ray Didinger. Ray, first, let's look back at the playoff loss. We don't want to spend too much time on that particular game, but any big takeaways from it?
No big surprise in the way it played out. I guess I thought they'd be a little more competitive, but I just, we had seen them play against good teams and good quarterbacks all year. I just kind of thought it'd be more of the same. I was a little surprised that it was really kind of over at halftime, certainly over in the third quarter. I thought the Eagles might be able to take it into the fourth, but no. I mean, it was, from the first drive, the way the Bucs took it right down the field, and the way Brady started picking them apart, you kind of had a feeling that's how the game was going to play out. So, we saw this year that the NFL's idea of adding 2 more wild card teams to the playoffs, be careful what you wish for, because you get those 7 seeds, and that's what they are. And the Eagles,
especially if they're from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we get both from Pennsylvania, but you get those two teams come in, and you get games that aren't even really playoff games. So you keep expanding, and that's what becomes of the playoffs. But that's I look at it as a game that was I thought was kind of what I thought it was going to be, but still, I don't think you can dwell on it and just dwell on the negative there. I mean, the fact that this team was able to. Look, I didn't even think they'd get to this. I didn't even think they'd get to the playoffs. So the fact that they were there and they won 9 games and did certainly improve in some areas, and you found some kids that can really play. I think you've got the foundation of something, and a coach who can coach, I believe. I think you've got the foundation of something good going into next season.
I wanted to ask you about what you just mentioned, young talent. It's really been an issue. For a long time here. I mean, their best players, the Kelseys and Fletchers and, Lane Johnsons. I mean, these guys are all in their 30s now. They haven't really – they've got some good young players. I think Goddard's a good player. Sweat's a good player. Miles is a good player. They don't have any elite young players, and they haven't for a while. And that's my biggest concern. I think they're trending the right way. I think some of those young guys, certainly Devontae is a step in the right direction, but especially on defense. That's why I think it's just such a big offseason because, BG is, I mean, who knows what you're ever going to get from him. I mean, I wouldn't count him out for next year, but he's going to be 34 coming off an Achilles. Fletcher took a big step down. Kelsey, we don't know if he's going to play or not, and he's well into his 30s now. So that's my big concern. Can they replenish the roster with some young guys? I think, they took a good step in the draft. There's some good players. Milton Dickerson, I think, is really good. Devontae is very good. So I think they're going in the right direction, but it's still a concern of mine, especially on the defensive side. Do they have those guys? When Rodney's gone, Fletcher's gone, BG's gone, what do they have left?
Yeah, I share that feeling, and that's one of the reasons why I am. I'm in the camp of let's give Jalen another year and use these draft picks to bring in young players and start to rebuild that defense. I think that's what you need. I think that if you look at this draft, and you mentioned some of them, the young guys that actually showed you some promise this year, and there were some. I would add Gainwell to that. I think Gainwell's a good-looking player. So, I mean, compared to a few other recent drafts that really yielded you nothing, this draft, I think, was a good one. And if they can, and they certainly have the picks to do it this year, if they can bring in a good, solid core of good young players this year, especially on the defense, then that's where my focus would be is to use this pick, or use these picks, have a good, strong draft, really fortify the defense with some young, fast, physical players over there, and give Jalen Hurts another year at quarterback and let him play and see what you got. I think that the danger of a final game like this one, where things go so badly and the quarterback looks so overmatched, there's a tendency to all of a sudden say, well, that's it. I've seen enough. Can't win with this guy. Well, are they saying that in Arizona about Kyler Murray right now? Are they saying that in New England about Mac Jones? I mean, they got in a playoff game here, and they did what sometimes young quarterbacks do. They struggled. I don't think it's fair to just sort of wash away everything Hurts did this year, because he did some good things just on the basis of that last game. I'm of the mind that let's give him another year and see with another off season of work and then a full training camp and a full season next year. See what he can be, because we certainly saw improvement this year. And if you look at this as kind of a rookie and a half year, we always talk about that next year is the big year of improvement you see in a quarterback. Well, let's give him that chance to improve and see. But I think there's an opportunity now for this team to get younger, faster, and significantly better with a good draft.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it there, because it's really what we're going to be talking about for a lot of the offseason. The Eagles tried to do their best to stop that talk a little bit with their press conference on Wednesday, saying that he's the guy. But as you look back at a season, you mentioned the improvement. Was it enough? I mean, was it enough improvement to make you think that – because I think there's two ways to look at this. One is, all right, he's the guy in 2022 because that's probably their best option. You don't want to give up a ton. And then there's the other thought that's like, he's their guy long term. I don't think anyone is there yet, but did you see enough from him this year to think that maybe he still could be the long-term answer if he keeps improving?
I think could be is the way I sort of view it. I'm not prepared to say, yes, absolutely. I've seen enough. Let's commit to him long-term. I think you're looking at a guy that you need to see him improve markedly next year. And then maybe you can say, okay, yeah, I think we got it. But right now, no. I thought that there was certainly improvement this year. I mean, if you look at it, just the raw numbers can sometimes be deceiving, but I mean, that's a significant jump in completion percentage this year. And I thought that in this down the stretch, the last 6 weeks or so, when he was playing with what was obviously a bad ankle and playing on a bad ankle, there was a stretch there where he really couldn't run. I mean, he really was very limited in what he could do with his legs, which is a big part of his game. And he became more of a conventional sort of passer. And I thought there were stretches there that, look, he's, I mean, you're not going to talk about him being, Montana. I don't know that he's that or ever will be that. But I thought that his play in the pocket, his ability to see the field, his ability to throw some balls on anticipation and on time improved. I mean, I saw some of that. Now, there's more work to be done, but I've had this discussion with scouts and coaches before, and there is some belief out there that, look, quarterback, he is what he is. If he's just not accurate, he's never going to be accurate. If he doesn't have a strong arm, he's never going to have a strong arm. And I don't believe that. I mean, I've seen guys improve a lot if they're willing to work at it. I mean, you got no better example of that than Josh Allen. I mean, go back and look at his college tape. And look at what he is now, and it's like two different guys. I mean, he's improved that much in every aspect of the game. And that's because he really worked at it and made himself into a much better quarterback. So you can improve. I mean, even Tom Brady, if you look at him from what he was at Michigan to what he became and what he is now in his 40s, I mean, he is improved all the time. So quarterback can develop more accuracy. He can certainly develop a stronger arm. He just has to be willing to work at it. But no one has ever questioned Jalen Hurts' work ethic. And, if you look at the player that he was early on at Alabama and then what he was by the time he got to Oklahoma and what he has been since he's gotten to the NFL, I mean, you see growth and improvement every step of the way. So I think that he can improve, and I think he's certainly going to work hard to improve.
I also think if he's got better weapons than, Jalen Reagor out there, and I mean, Quez Watkins probably ideally not a number two, he'll be more accurate if he's throwing to better receivers. I think having Nick for a second year as his play caller and Nick becoming a more savvy play caller, and play calling was terrible the first 4 to 6 weeks or so. So I think there are things that can point to that 61.2% mark coming up to where it needs to be, which is probably around 65% for him. He's not only he's ever going to be, a 68% guy, but you can live with 64%. And and just having better people around him. And like you said, if it comes down to hard work, I mean, nobody's going to put in the work like him. I mean, I don't question that. Like you said, I don't think anybody would ever question his work ethic. I mean, he's already, the day after the season, he was talking about, I'm year 3 starts now or whatever it was. I mean, I love his attitude, and if anybody can improve from where he is now to where he needs to be, it's him.
Yeah.
But there's also physical limitation. I mean, there's a ceiling somewhere. There's a ceiling that like he can't get above just because he is, he has the skill set that he has. So I just don't know where that is. But if he improves as much from this year to next year as he did from last year to this year, he's got a chance to be a pretty good player.
Yeah, I agree. And there is, I mean, you guys are probably aware of Jordan Palmer, who has become kind of this quarterback whisperer is probably not the right term, but quarterback mechanic is probably the best way. I mean, it's Carson Palmer's younger brother, who is never had much of a playing career himself, but is a real student of the position, and has worked with and has become this one-man repair shop for quarterbacks. And that's what he does. And guys in the offseason come to him and they work with him. And he gives them, and he coaches them on their mechanics, and he coaches them on the fundamentals. And every one of these guys that he's worked with, I mean, they think the world of him. And you look at some of the guys that he's worked with. I mean, he's worked with Patrick Mahomes. He's worked with Deshaun Watson. He's worked with Josh Allen significantly. Josh Allen says that the reason he's playing as well as he's playing now is the work he did with Jordan Palmer. Joe Burrow did before his final year at LSU. All of these guys, and they all say, he improved me dramatically from one year to the next. That's out there. If I were the Eagles, I mean, I would pay the freight. I mean, whatever Jordan Palmer wants to, whatever he charges, I'll be happily pay it, because I know to your point, Rube, that Jalen Hurts is willing to work at it. So I would say to him, listen, here's a plane ticket. We book the passage. Go out there and work with this guy for as long as you need to work with him. Because if you look at some of the guys he's worked with, I mean, he's made a difference.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
What's that?
Did he work with Christian Hackenberg?
No, he did work with Sam Darnold, though.
I wonder if he has the resume and he just puts Darnold at the bottom so he doesn't get hurt feelings. He just doesn't want to leave him off completely. But I don't know. Well, Hurts worked with Quincy Avery going into year 2, so I'm guessing he'll do that again. And if Avery had anything to do with his progression from 1 to 2, then it would make sense to stick with it. And the Eagles have always been okay with guys using their own coaches. The previous quarterback did it. I'm assuming that Hurts will probably go back to Quincy Avery, but Palmer's another one. It's just something to continue his growth. And Nick Sirianni's been really clear about, it really starts with footwork. And I think that everyone is on the same page about that. Now, some of the techniques might be slightly different, but in terms of the general understanding of where guys need to improve to be better passers, I think most of the core points are probably pretty similar. But Ray, as you look at Hurts, if you had to pick one area, not just say passing in general, is there one particular area that if you said if he has any chance, he has to improve in this area, what do you think that would be?
The obvious thing is accuracy, but I think more than that, it's anticipation. That's the one thing that a lot of the times he gets in trouble is he just waits for things to happen. He's not, to use the term, he doesn't throw guys open. He sort of waits for a guy to come out of his break, sees that he's open, and then throws the ball. Sometimes it gets there, sometimes it doesn't. To be a really, to what Rube was talking about, a 67, 68% completion guy, you have to be able to make that throw on anticipation. In other words, as soon as that receiver puts his foot in the ground and he's ready to make his break, that's when the ball has to come out. You can't wait for him to clear and then turn. You could do that in college, but you can't do that in the NFL successfully. And there were a couple times this year, there were a couple balls he threw where he did it. Interestingly enough, they tended to be to Goddard. It seems like those two have a really good feel in the timing part of it, that he kind of knows exactly when. I don't know if there's something in his body language that he can sort of pick up when Goddard's ready to make the break. And some of his best throws, and some of his best in terms of timing throws, have been to Goddard. It seems like they're kind of there where a quarterback and a receiver need to be. And he's still not there, obviously, with Quez. And he's not fully there with Devontae, but he is there with Goddard. But that's kind of what you need, is that he's throwing the ball before the guy even turns. Just as he's making his break, the ball's in the air, and that's the way you got to do it. And with a lot of the questions about the arm strength, I don't think he has. He doesn't have a Favre arm. He doesn't have an Elway arm. but I think his arm's adequate. But some of the times that his deep ball hangs up and it looks like he underthrows, I think it's because he's delivering it late. If you run a deep route, if you let the ball go earlier and you let the receiver go to it, sometimes he waits to throw that deep ball, and now when he's throwing it, the guy's 50 yards down the field. So now it becomes a really long throw. So I think the arm strength thing, you can compensate for that with a little bit better timing. All of these things are fixable. All of these things are coachable. And that's why I think this is a very important offseason for him, because I think we all agree he'll put in the time. I mean, he'll put in the time and he'll put in the sweat and the effort to get better. But I think he needs somebody with him to tell him where he needs to get better and how he needs to get better. He'll put in the time and the effort, but you want to make sure that the instruction he's getting and the people he's working with will give him will maximize that time.
I thought the first interception he threw Sunday was a perfect example of what you're talking about. And if you wait, the safety's going to, in that case, it was Mike Edwards came over, and if he threw it earlier, Devontae's open and Mike Edwards can't get over there. So it's just a matter of delivering the ball. And he also floated it a little bit, but that's exactly you articulated exactly what my thoughts are on that. And just throwing the ball earlier, just throwing it with more anticipation.
Because it's there. I mean, when you see that play, the cornerback actually stumbles and goes down, and Devontae sees it right away and puts his hand up. If the ball's out there, it's a touchdown. But he held it, and part of it was he was moving himself, and he wanted to try and get set. But by the time he got set, I mean, at the point where he was, a guy like Josh Allen or a guy like Herbert probably could have drilled that in there. I mean, with a guy who had that kind of arm could have probably drilled it past the safety and gotten it there. But Jalen doesn't have that kind of arm. A guy with an average arm winds up with what you got. I mean, give Edwards a lot of credit. I mean, he came from the hash over and made a really good play on it. But if the ball comes out earlier, right at the point where Devontae turns it up, it's a touchdown.
Let me ask you something, Ray, because, is it tougher for a running quarterback, a mobile quarterback, to get his footwork right because he's just so used to – I mean, his mindset is just always be on the move, throw on the move, maybe run here, maybe chuck it. But, the whole mindset isn't set my feet and deliver the football. Is it tougher for those kind of guys to develop sound footwork?
So, yeah, I think it is. Can be done, but it is. I mean, the one guy who made a very, very successful transition, a guy who was a great runner, who became a really good, fluid passer, was Steve Young.
I knew you were going to say that.
Huh?
I knew you were going to say Steve
Well, he's the classic case. There are people that would say it can't be done. And then you would say, well, no. I mean, Steve Young did it. Now, maybe he's the exception to the rule. But
Josh Allen's done it, really.
What's that?
Josh Allen has done it. I mean,
I would say that's probably true. I was thinking the other guys like Mike Vick never really did. But Mike Vick was able to get away with it because his arm was so strong. I mean, in terms of arm strength, he's a way stronger arm than Jalen will ever have. But in terms of his footwork, what we're talking about, the passing mechanics, the stuff that helps you win from the pocket, Mike never really developed that. But Young did. I mean, if you look at the young Steve Young versus the one that finally won the Super Bowl, or the guy that when he first took over for Montana to the guy who he later became, it's a real dramatic difference. But it didn't happen by accident. I mean, he recognized where he had to improve, and he had some really good coaches in San Francisco that worked with him. And he got to the point where, I think he was the first of the 70% completion guys. The year that they won the Super Bowl and had that 94 team that scored 1 million points, and Ricky Waters had a great year, and and Rice and all those guys. Young finished that year with 70% completion percentage. I don't think that had ever been done before. And so you're not going to complete 70% of your passes in the NFL unless your mechanics are pretty good.
I do like that we just brought up the two best lefty quarterbacks I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, that's fair to say. That's fair to say.
I'll never forget Michael Vick's first practice as an Eagle. and the ball was just exploding out of it. And he had been in prison. I mean, it's not like he was working out on his own. He had been in prison and then a month of house arrest, and then he's at the NovaCare complex the next day, and he's just standing there just firing these just missiles like 60 yards down the field. I mean, it was breathtaking watching it.
Yeah, I mean, he really could flick it 50 yards, and that's a rare thing. I mean, I've seen some guys with some pretty amazing arms, but Mike's is right there.
So let's move on from Hurts, because I don't want to neglect the rest of the roster. If you were Howie and you're going into this offseason, what are some areas you think we got to get better at this position or this position if we have any chance to improve next year?
Pass rush, edge rushers. You got to, if assuming that Jonathan Gannon will be back, I think it's pretty clear he's not going to change his philosophy and his approach. And it can work, but he needs better pressure from his front four to make it work. And so that's it. The good news is, I mean, there's a ton of pass rushers in this draft. They're going to go quick. They're not going to be hanging around. You're not going to get them in the 4th or 5th round. There aren't going to be any Trent Cole discoveries there. But there's a bunch of really good ones. And that would be my first priority. I think we mentioned earlier the idea of getting younger in the secondary. I mean, they have to do that. They need to get younger and faster in the secondary. And I know it's silly to even bring it up, but a linebacker, I mean, you can't just keep playing with special teams guys. I mean, you got to get. I mean, there's no clearer example of what a difference maker a blue chip linebacker can be than what Micah Parsons did for the Cowboys. If you have that kind of linebacker out there, he makes your whole defense look fast. And the Eagles just don't have that, and haven't had that for a long time. But there are those kinds of players in this draft too. So, I mean, if I'm Howie, I'm pushing my cart down the defense aisle and I'm just grabbing, because I think that's really where they have to get younger and frankly better.
Would you go defense with those 3 first-round picks? I would.
I certainly wouldn't rule it out. I would, I also think on the offensive side, I think they need another receiver. I mean, they've invested they put a lot of high draft picks at the receiver position, and frankly, they still are one short. They need that other guy. Now, whether you're going to get him in the draft or whether you're going to get him through free agency, one way or another, they need that other guy on the opposite side of Devontae. And if the right guy is sitting there in the draft in the first round, I might do that. I mean, it seemed a little crazy to pick wide receivers in the first round for 3 straight years. But the right guy's there, I would think about it. But a higher priority, I think I'm with you, Rube. I mean, if you keep the 3 picks, I would have no problem with going, pass rusher, linebacker, 2 pass rusher, maybe 2 pass rushers and a linebacker. I would have no problem with that.
Yeah. The linebacker thing's interesting because we all know they haven't taken one in the first round in, however long since 79. But with 3 first-round picks, you start to wonder if maybe they think, well, we wouldn't use our first rounder on this position. But if you have 3 of them, maybe that pushes them in that direction a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know how we've all covered the Eagles during the Howie years, and we know how he is on draft day. He's not a stand pat and let the draft come to you guy. He likes to wheel and deal, and he's never had more cards to play with than he does this year. I mean, if I were to guess right now, I think he's going to look for a player that's a top 5 player, and he's going to package 2 of those picks and trade up to get one guy, and then keep one of the other lower picks, and then see if the right guy falls to him there, or maybe trade that pick to somebody who's out of the first round but wants to jump back into the first round. That'll give you a bushel of later picks that way. But I don't see, given his track record and given his itchiness on draft night, I just don't see him sitting there at 15, 16, and 19 and just waiting for the draft to come to him.
I think that's probably true. Although, I mean, I think they need numbers. I think your chance of making impact with 3. I mean, because that's an area where you're going to get it. You should get an elite player. I mean, yes, you could probably, and the quarterbacks are going to bump guys down, and obviously the top few guys. I mean, the top couple edge rushers are not going to be able to get. There's going to be some tackles in there. I think at 15, I think where they're picking, there might be a lot of value taking 3 players there. 3.
Oh, you may be right, and that would be, they would be fortunate, and that's they had that sort of fall their way a couple years ago when they didn't feel like they needed a quarterback, and it was a draft when everybody was picking quarterbacks high, and all of a sudden that pushed some of the better players down a little bit. That could happen this year. It really could happen, and. Getting back to the linebacker conversation, linebackers are a little bit like running backs on offense. I mean, people don't tend to draft linebackers like real high, so a player like Nakobe Dean, who I think is really, really gifted. I saw him play a lot this year, and I just think his instinct, his nose for the football is remarkable. I mean, he's got all the things that you can't coach, but he's got them. And I think that he's a guy that could very well be there at 15. And again, it's a linebacker and it's the first round. And we know those two things don't typically go together for the Eagles. But there's a guy who I think could come in and I like right away be an impact kind of player.
Well, they've taken.
I'd be shocked if Howie sits there and takes 3 guys in those spots. Yeah. There's no way, right?
That's kind of what That's kind of what I think, but who knows? Who knows?
I'd be shocked. I mean, I even think there's a chance he could take 2 players and then trade a pick away and get future draft capital and then go into next year with more. None of that would surprise me.
The thing is, everybody talks about how they haven't taken a linebacker in the first round since '79, but they've taken some really good ones in the second round. Quentin Caver, Matt McCoy, and Barry Gardner, all in the second round. So when you can get that kind of value in the second round, why would you take one in the first round?
I know.
Who was the last one I took in the second? Kendricks? Was he the last one in the second round?
He was a second round pick, and he was a good player, had a good career. I thought he played really well in the Super Bowl season. They spent some money on Bradham and some draft capital on Kendricks, and it paid off. I thought Kendricks was pretty underrated. He was good.
Early in his career. I mean, he earned that contract early in his career.
Yeah, he was good in coverage.
Yeah.
He was a decent tackler. He could blitz a little bit. He was a good player. He was around the ball.
I agree with that. McCoy was the one. I mean, all the ones you mentioned are, they all washed out. The McCoy was the one that I couldn't believe it. I mean, McCoy was he was such a non-prospect. He didn't even get invited to the combine. I mean, I can't remember a guy who wasn't even invited to the combine being a second-round pick. I to this day I have no idea what they saw in the guy. I really don't.
I guess that was Tom Heckert. That was the Tom Heckert years.
Yes.
I think he was 05, I believe. But, yeah, McCoy showed up in Indianapolis at the Combine, and they just said, no, go home. We don't want you here. He actually went out there. But, yeah, they have it. But, yeah, Kendricks is the outlier. That was a good pick. I just don't want to
Ray, before we let you go, I wanted to ask you about I wanted to ask you about Nick Sirianni and just your thoughts on how he did in his first year and what your expectations for him are going forward.
I like him. I do. I like everyone else. 6-7 weeks into the season, I had my doubts with the way things were going, and it really wasn't about the botany. It wasn't about the flowers. That didn't help, but that wasn't really it. I just thought that the offensive approach early was just so hard to figure out. I mean, it just didn't make any sense. I mean, beyond not working, it just didn't make any sense. I mean, some of those games, and especially the game in Dallas, where you just don't run the ball at all. I mean, sometimes you'll run plays and they don't work and you lose a game, but you understand the structure, or you understand the thought process going in. But with Nick, some of those early games, you couldn't even begin to decipher what the thought process was. And I mean, that was when people were asking the question, was he even going to make it through the season? But I thought that he handled it. I thought he handled himself well. He didn't get really super defensive. He didn't lash back. He recognized what the problem was, and really kind of in midstream sort of reinvented his offense and did what good coaches do. He went to his strength. He said, okay, what do we have here? What can we build around? And he decided it was his offensive line, he was right. And then said, all right, well, this isn't exactly the offense that we expected to run, but I think this is the offense that we have to run, and installed it, called it. And all of a sudden the season, and with the benefit of a favorable schedule, the season kind of turned around. But there are a lot of coaches that won't do that, especially young coaches. They feel it's a sign of weakness. They'll come in, no, this is my plan. This is my system. This is my scheme. This is what I believe in. And if it doesn't work, they say, no, we're just going to keep working at it until it does work. And, Nick, was able to just sort of swallow his pride a little bit and say, no, we're going to have to adjust here. And what he came up with worked. And, they got to the playoffs, which I certainly didn't expect. And I thought that the one thing, and you guys have both alluded to it at various times in your writing, is it's obvious that the players kept faith with him throughout the season. And that's not easy to do. It really isn't. For a young coach that they're still trying to figure out if he knows what he's doing, it's very easy. It's very hard through hard times for that coach to keep control of the team and to keep the players listening and believing. And Nick did that. And that's, I think that speaks well of him. And he'll just get better from here. One of the things about Jeff Lurie is you look at the coaches he's hired, they've all done good. I mean, there's not a Matt Patricia or a Jim Zorn in the bunch that just look, finish that first year and say, wow, what did we get ourselves into here? I mean, I think his track record and his ability to find these coaches, and they're all new. I mean, they're all new to the position. And he's been right on all of them to this point. And I think he's right again. I think that Nick Sirianni did a really good job, and I think he's going to be a good coach here for a good long time.
I didn't see the Jim Zorn reference coming today. That was a nice treat.
Well, we couldn't go through the whole season without mentioning Jim Zorn.
Exactly.
I felt like I had to inject him into the conversation.
Fair enough. Ray, this is it's been a pleasure for us every week talking to you, and we hope you have a great off season. And there'll be a lot of storylines to cover, so maybe every once in a while we'll get your takes on them. But
I'm sure we'll cross paths. But I enjoyed this too. I look forward to it every week. I look forward to doing it again.
Nissan just made your choice for a new car an easier one than ever with their most exciting and fuel-efficient lineup. A choice is yours. Now get great offers across Nissan's full line. Shop your local Nissan store today at nissanusa.com.
Thanks, as always, to Ray. We do enjoy chatting with him every week during the season. Me and him tied at the top of our picks this year. 15-3. You were next at 14-4. And then it was a little tail off, but pretty impressive from us this year. I thought we did good.
Yeah. I started losing it late in the season. I started.
Wait, were you 13?
I think I was 2 behind you.
Yeah, you were 13-5 then.
I was 13-5 because I was trying to I basically picked Tampa. I picked the Eagles to beat Tampa just to try to tie. I was just basically going strategy there. But
that's a good idea because you got to try to make it ground.
I had nothing to lose. Like I don't care about losing by 2 or 1, but I'd rather have the shot at tying for the lead. So it was all strategy there. In the next couple of weeks, we got to go through our 2021 predictions. I went through them last night, and they're very interesting.
Yeah, see, that tells me I didn't do very well.
Well, you
went through.
There's a couple that you freaking nailed. It's unbelievable. We'll get to maybe next week. We'll do that.
I don't know if you're telling me the truth.
No,
'Cause I have a feeling.
I'm totally honestly. Yeah, there's a couple
Okay.
that you nailed.
Okay. Because normally when you're bringing them up,
No.
it's because
No.
I didn't do so good. All right. What did you make of what Ray said? I was so on board with what he said about throwing with anticipation with Jalen Hurts. That's the one thing he needs to improve. I don't think you can be an effective passer in the league if you don't do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I don't think, and this is what I've been saying, I don't think it's necessarily arm strength, because I think Drew Brees didn't have a rocket. He didn't have a huge arm. I mean, Brady doesn't have a huge arm. Brady has not thrown a 40-yard touchdown in his last 36 playoff games. How about that? Is that crazy? Yeah. So to me, but those two guys, Brady and Brees, Brees was so accurate and threw with such anticipation that it didn't matter that he had a average arm. And so you can improve your accuracy and you can improve your downfield, all that stuff. And it's basically understanding the defense, going through your mental processes quicker and getting rid of the ball quicker. And that's the next step for him. And yeah, it's something he has to do, or he's not going to be a successful, he could be a decent quarterback, but to be an elite quarterback, it's something he's got to make a lot of progress in. And I think he knows that.
Yeah. To be the quarterback here, he needs to do that. Because I don't think this organization will have patience for an extended period of time if you can't do that.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Got anything else before we wrap this up?
No. How did the blizzard treat you down there in South Jersey? The latest.
I got some flurries. They're done now. Yeah.
Okay. I got like a good whole fifth of an inch out there.
Oh yeah, not enough to shovel then.
No. I need over 3 inches to shovel.
Okay.
Like last time we got 4 inches 2 weeks ago, and I didn't need to shovel the driveway, but I like my driveway to look nice and clean and have no snow on it, no ice. So if there's 4 inches, I'll shovel out the driveway. That's good. That's the over-under right there, 4 inches.
I get that. All right. If you enjoyed the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. That's it. We want to thank Ray again one more time. We appreciate him joining us all season. For Reuben, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye. We'll talk to you soon.